I basically started selling Amazon almost just over 5 years ago now, and started doing retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, wholesale.
You started all the way in fourth grade.
I mean, the easiest point is using FBA, fulfillment by Amazon, grocery distributors, New York, grocery suppliers, Dallas, Texas.
How do you know if this product is going to sell or not? What's the main difference between doing wholesale compared to doing online arbitrage? And how did you hear about the BQool repricer?
I think I did the free trial first and liked it and saw it improve my sales a lot.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, BQool invites an Amazon seller who's flipped $250 over $4 million on Amazon in the last 5 years. He also runs his own prep and pack center since 2019. In this webinar, Steve is going to share with us how to scale up your Amazon business. He's going to share all the knowledge and tips that he's accumulated throughout the years. We welcome Stephen to our show today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, Stephen, just to help our audience understand where you're coming from, could you tell us a little bit about yourself for the people who don't know you yet?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Stephen, also known as Millennial Reseller on Instagram. I basically started selling Amazon almost just over 5 years ago now. I started, like you said, with about $250, going around to garage sales and thrift stores and selling on eBay primarily at the time, and then kind of learned about Amazon as a way that people do it full time, and started doing retail arbitrage, online arbitrage, wholesale, and eventually just transferred into completely wholesale, and been doing that for about 3 years now.
So, Stephen, tell us, my understanding is you started all the way in fourth grade to do your entrepreneurial pursuits. What are some of the other things you did before you started your online business?
Yeah. So some other things I did, as a kid, where I grew up in Wisconsin here, a very small town, like 5,000 people. And, me and some of my friends, we go around and like rake people's leaves on the weekends, which is not really like a business, more like a side hustle as a, kid in high school or whatever, mowing people's lawns, shoveling people's snow. But for actual businesses, I had a marketing company that I ran for a few years, where we managed people's social media, built websites for them, graphic design, SEO, that whole thing. And then I had a landscaping company where we did all sorts of landscaping and gutter work and things like that. And then for the last, 5 years, it's all been in the e-commerce space. So in my own Amazon business, like you said, the prep center, and then also doing coaching and mentoring people to learn how to do the exact same thing.
So, Stephen, tell us, how did you move into doing the online business? Because you said you started to sell on eBay about 5 years ago. Like, how did that all happen?
Yeah. So I'd had an eBay account since 2013, actually. When at the time I think one of my friend's parents had actually sold on eBay. And that's where I first kind of even heard of the term of selling on eBay. And my parents had a few things laying around the house they didn't want anymore. So I downloaded the eBay app and was like, hey, like I can sell this on here for $30 or whatever. And so I just randomly sold things off and on over the years. And then about 5 years ago, I transitioned out of the landscaping business I owned at the time. And I saw some YouTube videos when I was just on YouTube late one night of people actually selling on eBay full time and making like a living from it. I always thought of it kind of as a side hustle or just a way for people to get rid of their items. And that's how I saw, oh, wow, people actually make money doing this. And that's when I took that $200 or so, went to a garage sale. Remember, I bought it was a GPS tracker for $20, and I sold it that same night for $200. And that was like the first item that I sold after I decided I was gonna like try this thing out, see if I could make like a living doing it. So, and that kind of got me hooked after that. After that, I was going to more garage sales, thrift stores, started buying. The first thing I sold on Amazon was books primarily, and going to thrift store because it's a low barrier to entry. Books cost $1 to $2. So you take $300, you can buy 150 books, and on average, they're selling, for $10 to $20 or more. So you're making at least double your money back, So that's kind of how I got started, and then grew from there.
So you found a $20 item, and then you sold it for $200 plus, like just on eBay. And when did you decide to sell on Amazon and on eBay coming from eBay, or do you still sell on both?
Yeah, we still sell. It's not like a full-time commitment, I would say, to eBay. Mainly we use it now for like our returns we get, or damaged products, or things that like clothing, for instance. If we sell like clothing new, it comes back, the tag's ripped off of it, but it's still in good condition, we would sell that on eBay. But we don't like source inventory anymore to sell on eBay. But I mean, within that time, it was probably less than 6 months. Because I remember it was in the fall, about September. And then by December, I was like starting to sell on Amazon. But at the time, I was still full time growing both of them. And then it was about a year or so later when I realized, like, hey, Amazon has way more potential and you can scale it way quicker than with eBay. So that's why I kind of made the full transition to Amazon.
So just to summarize, for items that are refunded or used, you might resell it back on eBay. But for the majority of your business, it's focused on Amazon. And
Yeah.
you said that on Amazon, it's much easier to scale up. Like, why is that?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest point is using FBA fulfillment by Amazon is because say you order, 10,000 units of an item. If you're selling on eBay, you have to store those items yourself and ship each of those directly to the customer. With Amazon, you send all of those to Amazon. Obviously, you have to label them and prep them however they need to be prepped, but you send them to Amazon. Amazon handles shipping to the customer, they handle the customer service, and obviously you're paying them a fee to do that. But in the long run, it's way more scalable. Also, for a lot of the categories I sell in on Amazon, those items sell way more on Amazon, like common household items, like grocery products, pet products, personal care items. People go to Amazon to order those a lot more often than they would on eBay. And obviously Amazon's marketplace is very much larger than eBay is. So there's a lot more customers there.
So there's a lot more customers on Amazon, and they also do this fulfillment for you, which saves a lot of time shipping the product yourself for a fee, of course. And
Right.
for the different categories that you start, you're selling, that you talked about pets, about household items, like, were you always selling those items before, or did you move into those products like
Yeah,
afterwards?
I moved into those. I started out doing retail arbitrage, which is going to local stores and buying products and selling those on Amazon. So like for us, Marshalls, TJ Maxx, Walmart, Target, those type of places. And for there, I also at the big thing at the time was selling Nike products, and it still is a very large market. But at the time, there was a lot of money to be made selling Nike products. So I was primarily selling those once I was ungated and able to do so. And, so clothing, shoes, different items like that, toys, stuff from Marshalls. What I realized also with that is it's the highest return category on Amazon. I think it's about 20% of all items get returns. Obviously, people try things on, doesn't fit them, or they don't like the style. So then you have a lot of returns coming back. But then once I started transitioning into wholesale, is once I realized, hey, a lot of these distributors, they carry primarily those items I just said: grocery products, personal care items, pet products, home and kitchen, those sort of goods. And there are, of course, ones that carry some of those other things. But for me, like I always tell people, I like to sell needs versus wants, because, when someone goes and reorders deodorant or shampoo, they don't think about it. It's just something they need. Versus if someone's going to go spend $200 on a pair of shoes, they're like, oh, do I really want to spend this money? Can I afford this? There's a lot more decisions that go into making that buying decision. So that's why I prefer to sell, something that someone just needs versus something that someone like wants.
So one of the tips, Stephen, for our audience is you want to find needs rather than wants. And with the apparel, there was such a high return that you moved into other categories that, things that people need every single day. And talking about like product sourcing, what tips can you give when you're doing product sourcing?
Yeah. So for wholesale in particular, the easiest way, like I always tell people, and they think I just don't want to tell them the real secrets or whatever, but the easiest way I tell people is that literally just going on Google and typing, like, pick a category, right? So for instance, I'll say like pick grocery, and you type in grocery Los Angeles, grocery distributors New York, grocery suppliers Dallas, Texas, wherever you are, and then you substitute out grocery. You could put in pets or household items or personal care, or you can even be more specific, say deodorant suppliers or shampoo suppliers. So anyways, you'll get tons of results, right? And the thing most people don't want to do is sit there and go through every single website and fill out a contact form or try to call them. And that's one of the biggest things right there, is most people, if they even do that portion of it and get that far, then all they want to do is fill out a contact form or email them. And most of these suppliers and distributors, the larger ones, they're getting hundreds of these same emails a week, if not a day, from Amazon sellers, So they don't respond to a majority of them because they already have their core business, that they're selling to. So when you pick up the phone and call them, usually they don't get phone calls and say, hey, we're a newer company or whatever. We're looking to spend X amount of dollars with you. Could you please send over a product list? Let us know whatever other information you need from our business. So, and honestly, it's one of the easiest ways I found most of my suppliers I order from. And like I tell people too, is I've applied for over 10,000 wholesale accounts, and we got approved for about 1,500, 2,000 or so. And we actively order from about 15 to 20 of those, throughout the year. So just to give you an idea of like what it actually takes to, find good suppliers and how much work needs to be put in. And not saying it's going to be that way for everyone. Obviously, you might have a higher percentage, but that's one of the easiest ways to find wholesale suppliers, one of the cheapest ways to find them to get started.
So talking a little bit about wholesale suppliers and reaching out to so many of them, filling out those contact forms and then calling them as well. Why did you choose wholesale as your business model on Amazon? Because you started in retail and then you moved over to wholesale after a while. Like, how did that happen? And why did you do that?
Yeah. So, I mean, we did retail and realized just, the driving around and going to stores, hoping you can find inventory in the stores. And like I said, back then, 5 years ago, it was a lot easier. You could go to a Marshall's or a Nike store and easily spend $5,000 if you wanted to, but nowadays, even I saw the transition starting to happen then, but especially now, I've done it, just for the fun of it, been in one of the stores and trying to look for things. And it is a lot harder, now to do it. So anyways, I wanted to scale my business, and for this business too, like I tell people is, it doesn't have to be a full-time income. You don't have to get to $100,000 a month in sales or 7 figures in sales. You don't, if you want to make an extra $2,000 a month, you can easily do that and do one of those methods. But for me, I wanted to scale higher and grow, my business as much as I can. And that's what I realized is that doing online arbitrage and then ultimately going to wholesale, it was much more scalable because as soon as I found a good relationship with suppliers and good products to order, all I had to do was place the orders here from my desk. They would show up in the warehouse and then we send them out. I don't have to drive around and hope I can find inventory. I can look through spreadsheets and see exactly how much something would make, how often it might sell, and then just place the order and have it show up.
So when you're picking the products to sell from the wholesale buy list, what is your requirement? Like, what kind of ROIs are you looking for? And how do you know if this product is going to sell or not?
Yeah. So we typically try to look for a 20% ROI. It's kind of what we aim for. Now, of course, there's situations where, it might be 17% ROI, but we still order it because it's making $2 or $3 a unit and it's also selling 1,000 times a month. But how we really guess how often something sells is using, different softwares, different plugins like Keepa, of course, looking at the pricing history on it. If Amazon sold the product, if they do sell it, how often the buy box rotates to other sellers. But we always make a test order. So we usually try to never order more than 60 units of an item for the first run, or at very most 100 units is like the max I'll order. Even if it looks great, going to make a great return on it, you never know. You could send it in, and I've seen it happen a ton of times where an item says it'll sell 3,000 times a month. I send it in, it sells 30 times a month. And I've had it happen vice versa. As I says it'll sell 20 times a month, I send in 10 and those 10 sell out one day. And now I'm selling hundreds of units a month of that product. So, like I always tell people, the most accurate statistic of how something will sell is you selling it yourself in the past, then you can kind of gauge how often it'll sell. But those are kind of some of the parameters. Also, the other one is we try to stay above $1.50 profit per unit. So kind of what I aim for.
So you're looking at 20% ROI. You're looking at $1.50 or above profits. For you to actually go in the product. And before you go deep, you actually do a test buy and you'll send the test buy in to see how that works for your business and if that really sells. Now, back to wholesale a little bit. So if a seller, if he's interested in starting a wholesale business on Amazon, like getting suppliers from wholesale, what are the actual steps to do that?
Yeah. So if you're starting brand new, obviously you need to have an LLC or some sort of business registration. Or just a sole proprietorship. Obviously, you need to consult with your state, secretary or whatever, or consult with a lawyer, accountant, and see what's recommended for you. And then get a tax exemption. In some states, it's called a seller's permit. Some states, it's called a resale certificate. So you need to get one of those set up. So that way, when you're ordering these products, every single wholesale supplier is going to ask you for that resale certificate to make sure that you are allowed to resell their products and you don't have to pay tax on those products when you buy them from the supplier. So then from there would be opening your Amazon account. Now, obviously, you need to have like a business bank account, something like that too, because Amazon's going to want you to link a bank account so they can pay you out your, profits from the items you sell. And you set up that Amazon account, and then from there you're good to go. The other thing I would say that I always tell people is to set up a professional email address, because it just looks a lot more professional when you're emailing some of these suppliers, versus just like, jimmyjohn@yahoo.com, or whatever. But when you have an actual, and you can do it on Google for like $12, it's set up. You don't even have to you have to buy the domain name, set up the email on Google for $12, and you can put in your name, or you can put in, admin or something that looks professional anyways. So you can start contacting these companies. And then from there, like I said, you can go on Google and just start searching for companies. You can attend a trade show and walk through there and look for suppliers as well, as another great way. But from there, it's just the work is what it comes down to next is, I like what worked for me and what I would recommend is getting some sort of spreadsheet, Excel or Google, whatever you want to use, and keeping track of the companies you contact as well. Like I would, list their website, their phone number, maybe what state they're in, obviously the company name. And when I contacted them initially, I would put a date in there and say emailed or fill out contact form this date. So then I could follow up with a phone call, the next day or a couple of days later, and make sure to see when I could actually get an account open with that company.
So it's kind of like opening up new sales, actually, like what you're talking about. Like you have an Excel list, you fill out these columns, when did you contact them as well? And talking about the reseller permit, is that hard to get? Like to be able to register? Is it easy? Is it hard? Like what are they looking at when you are requesting for this?
Yeah. So for me, it was very easy. I think it's $50 a year is all I have to pay. I know in some states it might be like $300 or more, but all for me is what they wanted is the name of the business, an address, contact information, and your EIN number is another thing you need to sign up for with the IRS, but also very easy to do. But once you have all those, it's super simple. They email you electronically the resale certificate or seller's permit. And then from there, you can just start sending that to wholesale suppliers whenever they request it.
So you would have an LLC or have your own company. And then the next step, you would be able to get the reseller permit. And then after that, you start contacting the different wholesalers. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Because you don't want to in a situation where you find something for wholesaler and you want to order it, but you don't have a resale certificate. So now you might have to wait a few days or a week, but you already told the supplier you want to, place the order, but you're delaying it. So you're starting off on the wrong foot, So make sure you have everything ready to go at first.
So what's the main difference between doing wholesale compared to doing online arbitrage? Just for people to understand the difference.
Yeah, of course. Online arbitrage is where you go to a retailer's website, right? So for instance, Walmart, Target, Kohl's, there's tons of, obviously, any retailer's website that you might order from, and you would then place those orders on the website. They show up and you send them to Amazon exactly like you would any other product. The difference with wholesale is you're either ordering from, say you go on, Walmart's website, right? And you order a barbecue sauce. And the difference with wholesale is you can go directly to that brand and potentially order directly from the brand. Now you might be able to get the product cheaper, or even if you can get it for the same cost, now instead of going to Walmart, and on Walmart's website, you can only order 12 of those units at a time. And say you're selling it on a 3-pack and you want to order 100 units, you need to check out with Walmart, 200, 300 times just to get the amount of inventory you want. Versus even if you're buying directly from the brand themselves and it's for the same price, you can just tell them, hey, we want 300 units. Okay, they ship them to you. That's it. It's a lot easier and quicker. And like I said, sometimes it could be cheaper too. And that's ordering directly from the brand supplier, but also you can order from distributors where they carry a lot larger inventory of all different kinds of brands, sometimes all different kinds of categories as well. So that's why, I transitioned to that because, like I said, it's more scalable. You can order more units, have access to more inventory. And we do still do some online arbitrage. About 10%, 15% of our business is still online arbitrage because some of those, the ROI is typically a lot higher with online arbitrage. But also the price fluctuates a lot more on Amazon because there's more competition of people buying the exact same products. So it's kind of like the difference between the two of them.
So for online arbitrage, like you might get a deal sometimes, you might not. So there'll be some different price fluctuations. There's a lot more fluctuation than wholesale. And also the volume the inventory that you can purchase is going to be different than if you just go directly to the distributor or actually to the manufacturer of that product. That's what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you are talking to a wholesaler, right? Like, if you fill out the contact form, they finally got back to you, you're on the phone with them. Like, what are some of the questions that you suggest people to ask the wholesaler from your experience of contacting over 10,000 wholesalers?
Yeah. So I have 3 questions I always ask them as soon as we open an account. The first one is, do they offer any net terms? Which that means basically is some suppliers will allow you, it's called like a net 30, net 60, net 90, is they will allow you to order a product. And then from the day, it depends on the supplier. Most of them, it's from the day that the product ships, then you have 30 days to actually pay for the inventory, which is nice, especially if you start out with wholesale and you don't have a ton of money. You can sometimes get that product in and then have it shipped to Amazon and start selling the product, making that money before you even have paid for the product, So you can kind of recoup some of the cost already and then use that to pay for the product, Another one I asked them is if they offer any kind of volume discounts or if they have any closeout items. Say, so a lot of them, well, if you spend over $5,000, you'll get 20% off your total order. Or if you order 100 units of a SKU, you get 20% off that order. And then the third question I always ask them is what their shipping cost is. Some of them, exactly like the same thing, have where you might have to spend $5,000 and then you get free shipping, qualified free shipping, which if you're ordering, 7 or 8 pounds of product, that's definitely a huge savings because that could be $3,000-$4,000 depending on where it's coming from. So those are the 3 questions I always ask them to kind of get the ball rolling, because you need to know those things when you're looking at the products and trying to calculate your profit. A lot of people don't even factor in their shipping costs. If you have an order that you paid $5,000 for the product and the shipping costs you $1,000, you're really paying $6,000 for that inventory. So you need to factor that into your margin. If you think you're making $1.50, you might only be making $1.35 because you have the shipping cost factored into it, So those are the main 3 questions I always ask every supplier before we place an order.
The 3 key questions, the payment terms, like, are you able to get a better payment term? This way you can use that money to sell out the product, before you're paying them, or at least you get part of the stock money back before you're paying. And then the second one, you said, is there any special deal? Like the minimum order, if you do a certain number of order, you can get additional discount. And the third one is also the shipment, like the shipping costs. So these are all related to kind of the cost for your product that you're getting it for. So you can actually make profit for that. And I'm wondering, are there some other tips that you have when you're dealing with wholesalers? Like, what are some other helpful tips that now after dealing with so many of them?
Yeah, of course. A lot of them you're going to have. What I've realized is my best suppliers are always the worst at communication or getting back to you. It's very difficult to get an exact idea of when something going to be shipping, how much of something they have available. And because a lot of the businesses that might have, or suppliers rather, some of the best inventory, they don't have websites. They don't have, like marketing send out. They don't advertise their products. It's more so you find them and then you develop a relationship directly with that person. So sometimes it's a phone call. Hey, I have 2,000 units of this available. Do you want any of them? Let me know how many you want by the end of the day. And some of those are some of the best deals where you might be making a 200% ROI or something on, but you have to have a lot of patience with wholesale suppliers, because whether they're a small business and have too many customers contacting them, or they're a big business and still have a huge customer base to work with and navigate. Basically, from what I've realized is you need the wholesale suppliers more than they need you. So you always need to be very patient with them. You need to, and there's times too when I open an account and I see there's a lot of potential, I may make an opening order that has products that don't meet my margins, that might even break even at times, just to establish the relationship. If it's a very big account, I see a lot of potential there, and the minimum order might be $10,000. I say, okay, I'll order some stuff that's going to sell quickly, even if it doesn't make the margin I need to, because that way it opens me up for better opportunities down the road with them. They see I'm a serious buyer. They're going to give me the time of day and see that, okay, hey, we'll send him some of these exclusive deals or some closeout items because we know he's a serious buyer and he could actually make the commitment to buy it because he's already ordered from us, So that was one thing I would say is, have patience, of course. Number 2, place your first order as quickly as you can. And then three, don't be afraid to ask for discounts, you know. Like I said before, it's one of the three questions I ask. And even if they say we don't offer any volume discounts, because a lot of them won't disclose that they do. But if you come to them and say, hey, if I order 3,000 units of this product, it's currently at $16. Could you give it to me for $14? You know, the worst they're going to tell you is no. But more often than not, they'll say, we can't do 14, but we can do 14.50 or 15. Well, you're still saving $1 than you initially planned on paying for it. So those are some additional, you know, ways I would help navigate working with wholesale suppliers.
Hey, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? Like
Exactly.
for an extra deal. And for wholesale, like how much money do you think is reasonable? Like for people who want to get into wholesale, like what's realistic? Like when you are contacting them for that first order, and how deep do you have to go?
Right. I mean, I always recommend like $5,000 because then you can, you know, spend about $1,500 maybe between three different suppliers. Because also too, you don't want to go and spend all of your budget with one supplier, right? Because, you know, God forbid something happens and they decide just to take your money, or it gets frozen up, or they take it and don't ship your products out for 2 months and now you're out that money. Or maybe they do ship the products and everything's fine, but you get the products and they don't sell it all, or the price tanks on all their products for whatever reason. So that's why I say spread it out between at least 2 or 3 different suppliers at first. That's why I recommend $5,000. Obviously you can start with any amount of money. It's just, you might not have as much buying power, obviously, or as much ability to negotiate a better deal if you need to, because the suppliers themselves are all based on volume. You know, they want to move units, they want to move products out of their warehouse, and you can't do that and get a better deal if you're only spending $200, and they're not going to take you seriously anyways as a buyer. If you say, hey, I have $200 to spend, they're going to tell you, sorry, we can't work with you, you know, unless they're a very small supplier. But obviously the more money, the better to start with, but I would say around 3,000 on the very low end, but preferably closer probably to 5,000.
So you would recommend around $5,000 and then spread your eggs around. Like you don't want to go all in, and then you can actually try out the different wholesaler. And if something happens, you still have another revenue source, at least from those products that you're able to get.
Yeah, exactly.
Now let's talk a little bit about your prep and pack center. Yeah. So, hey, everybody, you know, we are talking to Stephen Mattox. He is a wholesale seller, you know, from $250 all the way to $4 million in the last 5 years. And he also has a prep and pack center. So let's talk a little bit about the prep and pack center. Stephen, why did you start your own prep and pack center business?
Yeah, at the time, I had a few friends in the Amazon space, you know, that were basically in between the stage of, hey, this is getting too big to do out of my house, and then looking at getting a warehouse potentially. And so I'd obviously heard of other people, you know, having prep centers and them existing. And at the time, I just moved into my first warehouse, and I definitely wasn't using the full space that I had available because I didn't need it at the time. My business hadn't grown that much yet. And so I saw it as a way to, one, just mainly help me offset the cost of my warehouse expenses, and then obviously, you know, make maybe a little extra money on the side. So I first started offering it through my Instagram to a few other like sellers that I knew, and one thing led to another, and, you know, it's grown to where it's like it's full own operational business today. But that's how I started at first, was just seeing other people through Instagram, social media mostly, that needing like someone to fulfill and prep their inventory for them because they were doing it out of their house, but they didn't want to commit to getting a warehouse for 3 years or 5 years. So that's where the whole idea kind of came from.
For the prep and pack center, like who should be using a prep and pack center? Who should use it?
So anyone, like I tell people, you know, if you want to seriously scale this business to full-time or to a full-time income rather, and maybe you already work a full-time job, or you just don't have the time to dedicate to prepping and the physical storage of your products, receiving them, inspecting them, you know, prepping them, send them out to Amazon. So anyone who doesn't want to deal with any of that, right? But number two is also for people who want to do wholesale, because another thing about wholesale, almost 90% or more of them, in my own experience, will not open an account with you if you do not have if you're not shipping to a commercial address. Like they won't ship to residential addresses. And even if they do ship to residential addresses, you'll be having to pay a liftgate residential delivery fee. So you'll pay an extra couple $100 or more to have that shipment delivered to you, even if they are able to. So people who want to do wholesale, they use a prep center because they can open an account with their own business registration address, but the supplier sees they're still shipping to a commercial, you know, warehouse or address, and then they're fine with that, you know. So And also too, obviously most people, you aren't going to be able to store if you have 5 pallets or 10 pallets delivered to your house. You'll have to store those outside or in your driveway or somewhere. If you ship them to a prep center, they obviously have the ability to receive those and prep them. And also too, the main thing I tell is that a lot of people don't want to commit to a 3 year or 5 year lease on a warehouse, right? Especially when it's your first one, you're going to have to personally guarantee it as well. So even if the business goes bankrupt, you're still on the line personally for the rent at the warehouse until they can find someone else to move into that space, which is a big risk a lot of people don't want to take on. And you also have to factor in payroll for hiring employees, payroll taxes, obviously equipment, supplies, utilities, insurance as well for your warehouse. So basically, once you factor all those things in, and I tell people too, if it was me looking back and I was just starting out wholesale and just wanted to run an Amazon wholesale business and scale it as quickly and as much as I could, I would use a prep center. Obviously now I've already built, a prep center and have a warehouse that I'm committed to for the next 4 years on our lease. So I'm in a different situation. But if I was starting out again, it's just a lot easier to scale because you don't physically have to sit there and polybag 400 items or 500 items, and send them off to Amazon. So basically anyone who wants to scale and doesn't want to take on the risk and cost of running their own warehouse.
So when you get to this level where it makes sense to have your own prep and pack center, if you're doing wholesale as well, and if you want to reduce your risk when you have a lot of products that you have to store, you want to just pay variable fees. And then also you don't want to spend all that time prepping and packing the products. And that's a good time for you to find a prep and pack center. What are some of the selection criteria when picking a prep center?
Yeah. So for most people, what you want to make sure of is, because we've done trade shows for a prep center before, we've advertised at a booth, and we've spoke to a lot of sellers that, don't even use our prep center, just hearing stories or, reviews of them of other prep center experiences. And the main thing you want to make sure is that they're actually a legitimate prep center, first off, because I've heard tons of horror stories from people of sending thousands of dollars worth of inventory and never hearing from the prep center again. Basically, they just take your inventory, and unfortunately, it happens. So obviously, you want to do your research, make sure they're a legitimate business. Ask them if they have insurance, if your inventory is covered under their insurance policy when it's in your warehouse. If it gets stolen, if there's water damage, fire damage, anything like that happens, it's something you want to check out. Obviously, you want to look at the pricing to see if the products you're going to be sending, obviously you want to still make sure that you're still making the margin you want to make after factoring in the prep center fee. So if you sell a lot of bundle packs, 3 packs, 4 packs, or whatnot, just about every prep center charges differently for those and more for bundles than just a single unit that needs a label on it. So you want to make sure the pricing matches your buying criteria when you're looking at your profit margins. And another thing you always want to look for and ask them is their average turnaround time. Does it take them, will you have one shipment out a week? Will it be 2 weeks before you get a shipment out? Will it be, 2 days, 3 days? How long does it take on average? And also, how do they communicate with you? Is it by email? And how do they track your inventory? Do they use spreadsheets? Do they use a different kind of software? How does everything work? Just some beginning questions you want to ask them before you go and, sign on to start sending them products, because that way you know what to expect once you start sending inventory to.
And typically, like for the product that you're sending into the prep and pack center, how much profit does it need to have in order for it to make sense for you to use the prep and pack center, including the cost?
Yeah. So obviously it's going to be different for everyone's business and everyone's financial situation. For me, like for instance, for my business, it's like I said, we like to make $1.50 on all of our units, but also the $1.50 is factored in the cost of running our warehouse, the cost of our employees, the cost of supplies. So if I was outsourcing all that and I was still paying 50 cents a unit, I might be okay with only making $1 because I don't have to touch anything. I don't have to prep anything. I don't have to receive it, look at it, nothing. So you want to factor that into your margin, because some people do say like, oh, if you're charging me $1 or $1.50 on the item, I'm not making any money. Well, that means one of two things. You either need to source better inventory or sell your items at a higher margin, because you obviously now have to pay for the cost of it, And even if you don't use a prep center, you have your own warehouse, you should be factoring that into your margin anyways, because it's an expense. If your rent is $5,000 a month, you have an employee for $2,000 a month, you have insurance and supplies and The cost of your poly bag might be 20 cents. You might only be making $1 when you think you're making $1.50 anyways. So some things you want to take into consideration when you're looking for, a prep center.
And what's your prep center's name called? What's the name?
Yeah, it's called a LBOE prep.
Does that stand for anything? Like LBOE? Like
It stands for a little bit everything. So when we first started our e-commerce business, people always asked at the time like what we sell. And I always caught myself saying I always sell a little bit of everything because it was true at the time. We sold clothing, personal care items, pets, grocery, toys, everything, anything that made money at the time, So that's what it stands for. That's where it came from.
Yeah, that's pretty catchy. A little bit of everything. And
Mm-hmm.
for your prep and pack setter, is there any special promo for our audience who's listening to this today?
Yeah, so we are currently giving your first 100 units you send to us are completely free. So if you send us 500 units and we would, take off 100 of those units, you would only pay for the 400 units you're sending. So your first 100 units that you get prepped and shipped with us will be completely free.
Well, that's fantastic. And then I think you just mentioned this webinar that, we're doing together to claim that special deal. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Fantastic. So let's backtrack a little bit. And we're wondering today, like if you had $100 to start an Amazon business, how would you spend it? Because you come a long way.
Right. I would probably do the exact same thing I did before, is because you want to get the most bang for your buck, right? You want to, if you spend $100 in wholesale, it doesn't really get you anywhere. If you do it in online arbitrage or even retail arbitrage, it's going to be a long time before you get that money back and flip it up to where you're making a decent amount of money from it. So I would start out, going to thrift stores and looking for high-end items that you can buy at a low cost, or going to garage sales and doing the same thing. If you start out with $100, you can go to a library book sale where a lot of their books might only be 50 cents or $1. So you can buy 200 books or 100 books potentially and send those into Amazon. And now you might be able to make, there's a very good possibility you can make $1,000 off of that $100. If you put it into books, it's going to take a little while to get all that money back. But it's probably, I would do something along those lines to start until I get a good amount of capital back, a couple thousand, few $1,000s to where I could start wholesale, obviously, and then transition into that.
Earlier, you mentioned that, it's getting a little bit harder when you're doing retail arbitrage. You're going into stores, mm-hmm. There's limits now of how many you could buy. Also, sometimes the margins after you calculate it doesn't really make sense. Do you think it's still possible to start an Amazon business in 2023?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I get this question a lot and I see a lot of talk about it. A lot of people say Amazon's so saturated and the space is so, so many new sellers coming on and things like that. And what a lot of people don't realize, in the United States, over half of the entire population has an Amazon Prime account, and out of all the products sold on Amazon, I forget the exact statistic, but it's around only 20 to 30% of the products sold on Amazon are actually sold by Amazon themselves. So that means the other 70 to 80% are sold by third-party sellers. And that's only going to continue to grow. If you look at the last few years, and it's only going to, the e-commerce space only going to continue to grow because more and more people continue to order online. And a lot of people too, they order their common household items, like I mentioned before, on Amazon. They might get their dog food on Amazon and set it up to where it just automatically ships once a month. Instead of going to the store and grabbing a 30-pound bag of dog food, it just gets delivered straight to their doorstep. So I do still think it's very viable to start an Amazon business currently. Like, obviously you can't go to Marshall's anymore. And for me back in the day, I would buy 200, 300 pairs of shoes at a single store potentially, or at a Nike store, and be walking out with thousands of dollars in potential profit. Like, obviously it's easy to do that anymore, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. You just might have to look for different items instead of shoes that were the hot thing back when I was starting out. Now you might have to look in the beauty section of Marshall's or the makeup section and find good items there. Or like you said, do online arbitrage to start, or transition completely into wholesale where there's still a lot of potential.
And if it's you, like, how much do you suggest to start with? If it's yourself, like how much money to start if you were going to do things differently again?
To start with Amazon, I mean, you honestly don't need any money. You can start with selling your own items, and that's something after I was already starting to sell in the early stage of Amazon, but I realized there were things around my house, old video games or DVDs or board games, things that you can sell in the used condition on Amazon. And you don't have to pay anything for those products. Obviously, you already own them. So once, obviously, you need to set up an Amazon seller account. And if you get the professional account, it's $40 to do that. And maybe you want to get a set up a business bank account in your LLC, which might be another $50 or so. So if you want to do it starting off, you might need like $500. Obviously, a couple hundred to put towards inventory, and then a couple hundred to get your business set up. Now, you don't need to set up an LLC and everything right away if you're not planning to jump into wholesale. You can be a sole proprietor, which costs nothing, and just open your Amazon account. But yeah, I mean, you can literally start with no money if you want to just start selling your own items.
So you would start with around $500 if you were going to go into wholesale later on.
Right.
And that's registering your company. That is also starting your Amazon account and getting inventory as well that you mentioned. And so let's talk a little bit about the tools that you use. Like, when did you start using a repricer? And why did you start using a repricer?
Right. So I started, I think, right when we started doing retail arbitrage. I started using BQool, of course. And the reason why is because I saw a lot of other sellers, recommending repricers and saying that you could improve your sales velocity by having a repricer. And I was doing it the old manual way for a while. When I first started, I was going into Seller Central and automatic, I would see a product had been lowered by 10 cents to get the buy box. So I would lower my product by 10 cents manually. But once you have, 100 SKUs or 50 SKUs, and even if you only have 10 SKUs, when people are using a repricer, especially like BQool, that's being done right, immediately all the time. The software is always managing the price for you. So if the price changes by a penny, it's automatically matched to it if that's how you have it set up, versus where you manually might be only able to check your repricer once or twice a day. You're missing out on sales all throughout the rest of the day. And even once you change yours manually by 10 cents, the other people who are using a repricer, theirs is automatically going to change right after you just change yours. And now your price might not even matter. So that's why it's definitely a very important thing to start off with once you can afford it, is to start using a repricer.
And how did you hear about the BQool repricer out of other repricers on the market?
I think I'd seen some other people using it and doing my own research. And it was one at the time just stood out to me. I think I did the free trial first and liked it and saw it improve my sales a lot right away. And I definitely liked the idea of not having to manually do it anymore. So then I, bought the subscription and started using it.
How has BQool helped your business? Like, when you were using it, like you said, it increased your sales immediately. You saw an immediate impact. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. So it definitely, I think it was almost $500 in that next day, because I did it at night. And the next day it was almost $500 more in sales. At the time, I was only doing about $500 in sales a day. So I had $1,000 in sales a day, which was huge for me at the time. And so that's why I saw, hey, this is definitely worth it. I'm going to go ahead and buy the subscription for it. And because and then also the other thing I realized is it's going to save me a lot of time by not having to sit there for 30 minutes or an hour every day and manually going through and adjusting these prices to make sure I'm still selling, so it definitely was well worth the investment 5 years later.
Yeah. So it increased the sales, it saved you a lot of time. And let's talk a little bit about the rules. Like, when you're picking rules, how do you pick your repricing rules? And when do you need to change the rules?
Yeah. So we use a few different ones that BQool offers. Obviously, we use, trying to win the buy box. We use the match FBA low price, depending on what the product is. And then also the conditional repricing, where you can choose the buy box win percentage. You can go off of how many days in inventory you have had. If you have had stock for 60 days or past 30 days, you can set it up to where you want to automatically start decreasing by X amount of dollars or percentage. And that way you can start getting rid of that stale inventory and get money back into your business. Where if you're doing that manually, it's going to take you months at a time to, go through and manually adjust that. So it's definitely a nice benefit to be able to just get money back into the business and reinvest that in new inventory.
So for you, like, when do you start selling this overstock items? Like, when you start discounting and, selling items that aren't moving, is that something that you would do when products aren't selling, or what do you do?
Yeah, we definitely do that. Usually we check after about 30 days. It's after it's been at Amazon Live and not in transfer anymore for 30 days, we kind of take a look and see, okay, like how many units do we have left of this item, and how many have sold in the last 30 days. And then we might say, okay, well, let's set it up on the conditional repricing because we only sold 10% of it, and we want to get some of this money back. So we might set it up to where it drops it by 10 cents every 5 days or 2 or 3 days after that. But usually once it hits 60 days, we definitely are just at that point trying to get our money back, because especially in the wholesale business, it's all about how quickly can you flip your money, how quickly can you continue to build your capital. Because even like I mentioned before, even if you have those net terms with those companies, those bills, they still come due. You still have to pay them at the end of the month. So you still want that cash flow is the most important thing in the wholesale business, and probably Amazon business in general. So that's why it's so important to use a repricer to make sure you're getting every dollar back as quickly as possible and still making the margin you want to make.
Let me just show people exactly like what Stephen is talking about here. Like if you were to set it up, what he's talking about, the 30 days, it's important. And if you want to lower your price based on the 30 days, yeah, let me just quickly log in here just to show everybody how that's going to work. In our example here, we would go to the conditional repricing, and then we can go into the FBA advanced condition, and we can call this like 30 days wholesale, for example, just as an example of this, how we would do things here. And so right inside here, we can pick, depending on the number of units sold, for the last 30 days. And then we could save, and then we could decide, for the units sold for the last 30 days, if it's been, let's say, greater than 30 units, or actually less than, because, we're talking about products, it's less than or equal to maybe the last 30 days, less than 30 units or something. And then you could actually change your minimum price right here. So maybe before it was 20%, you could possibly change it to 15%. You could add another condition here based on the available units that you have. And here we have the available quantity as well. So this would be different. Let's say if you have available quantities of more than 100, then you would set this differently than if you have quantities of less than 50. Yeah. So for our conditional repricing, these are some of the settings that you could do. If you wanted to sell out some of the products based on your business model, and especially you have to pay those wholesalers, you have to pay those manufacturers as well to get that cash flow going. And there's so much other ones like inventory age and other ones based on quantity as well. Yeah. So back to Stephen here. And then Stephen, we want to ask you, what kind of other tools do you suggest people to use when they're running their Amazon business that you think are essential?
Yeah. The main one I always recommend, obviously most people are already familiar with it if you've looked at Amazon at all, is Keepa, because you can track the price history, you can track if Amazon's been on the listing, how many sellers have been on the listing. You can get an idea of how often the product is selling as well. And that's one of the tools I use every day. Also, another plugin that I use is reseller, and that's basically just a profit calculator, but it shows on the Amazon listing, so you don't have to click into another screen in order to see if something's profitable. So those are two of the ones I use every day. Obviously, we already mentioned the repricer like BQool. Other than that, there are softwares that we use sometimes to go through wholesale spreadsheets. And basically, once you get these lists from suppliers, there may be 10,000 products on there, and obviously not all of them are going to be good. Maybe not even 10% or 5% might be good. Sometimes you can eliminate at least half the sheet or 70% of it and then go through the rest manually, because ultimately, like I tell people too, is manually is the best way to even go through those sheets. Like obviously it's going to take time, and we have a staff of VAs, that virtual assistants that help us with that, and then we have someone in-house that oversees it. But yeah, those are a few of them that we kind of use every day in our business.
So you talked about like Keepa, knowing what how to set your mins and max prices, and also the demand for the product. Also reseller to calculate the profits for the product, and then also a repricer, and as well as some sourcing software that can help you with the wholesale list. And I want to ask you, you also mentioned VAs, right? Do you use VAs? Like, I guess you use them. Like, what do you use your VAs for? Or do you have any suggestions on hiring VAs?
Of course. So I use, I think three of them is the ones we have like kind of full time, and almost all of them are just for going through wholesale spreadsheets, right? Because sure, we may use the software to eliminate a lot of the products that are on the list, but even after that, you still have a lot left over, and those need to be gone through manually, because I've tried a lot of different softwares, and a lot of them will miss things. Whereas if it's an actual person looking at the listing, they can see where the software might say, hey, this makes, $8 profit per unit, but the software is thinking that it's the cost of it is a one pack, but that item is actually sold as a six pack. So really, once you factor in the buy cost is six times what it is, the product might not make any money or lose money. So those are things that why I recommend going through it manually and using a VA, because it's a lot cheaper, obviously, than hiring a full-time employee to do it. But as far as hiring them goes, one trick, I forgot who or where I learned it from, but one trick that helps you eliminate a lot of the potential applicants to your VA position is you want to, somewhere in your job description, you want to put a line further down or in the middle of it that says, like, if you are interested, reply to this email and put in the subject like giraffe or red car or something like that. Because that way, they actually read through the full job description. Because there's a lot of them who just see like select a category, e-commerce or whatever, and they just hit apply to every single one of them. And obviously, when you're hiring someone for a position that needs to be very detailed and very analytical, going through spreadsheets and calculating margins and all that sort of thing, you want them to be very detailed. So if you see that they read through your entire job listing and read through all three paragraphs or whatever and took the time to do it, that means, hey, they're actually willing to do the same thing when it comes to working in your business. So that's definitely been a huge thing that helps, eliminate a lot of the people who apply for the position.
So in the job application, you have some in the description to do a certain task or write a certain thing, and when you're evaluating the candidates, you will quickly be able to filter out many of them who didn't follow the instructions, and you can find the ones that are more detail oriented when you're trying to find VAs.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go through and I just delete anyone who didn't reply to it with the instructions that were in the job description. I delete all of those applicants, because if they're not even going to take the time to do it there, why would I want them to work in the business to not do the same thing?
And which part of the job can be outsourced? Like when we're talking about Amazon business, and which part should you do yourself?
Yeah. So when you're starting out, you should do all of it yourself is what I recommend, except for like maybe the prep part of it. But even the prep, you might want to do a shipment or two or three yourself, because that way you can get a good understanding of what to expect, even if you're working with a prep center, of, hey, like, how do these products go in the box? Why do I need a poly bag? Why am I being charged for poly bags? Just to get a good understanding of it. But that's definitely one thing you could outsource. And like I said, going through potential supplier spreadsheets is one you could definitely outsource. But at first, you want to do that yourself first, because how are you going to train someone to do something that you've never done yourself before? Even if you think you have an understanding of it, if you've never done it yourself, it's going to be very hard to train them to do it. And two, you don't know what to look for. You can't get a good understanding of if they're doing it correctly or whatnot. A third thing you could potentially do is have someone look over like a repricer for you, or some inventory management software, and have them, make sure that things are added to the repricer correctly, and everything's set up correctly for you. But again, you want to have a very good understanding of that yourself before you outsource that to someone. And another thing that I've used them for is to find potential wholesale suppliers. Just the same method I mentioned in the beginning is going on Google and finding, grocery suppliers, and you can just make a list of them for it. You can either have them build you a list, and then you can have them contact the companies, at least through the email or contact form. And obviously there's some that will even call for you, or you can just have them build the list out, and then you yourself go through and contact the companies, and try to open accounts with them. But those are a few things I've used them for in the past. But like I said, you definitely want to have a good understanding of all of those things before you outsource that to someone else.
So you want to be able to know, some of the important things for that task before you outsource it to the VA. And then what is good and how to measure as well. And then I'm wondering, like, what do you recommend sellers to do? Because we're ending the holiday season, it's going to be ending soon. Like, so post holiday season, during the low season, What do you recommend Amazon sellers to do during the low season?
Yeah. And, a lot of people do, obviously think it's like the slow season, which it is. It's typically across the board slower for people because obviously everyone spent a lot of money on, their Christmas or holiday season on toys and gifts and things like that. But again, one thing you can do is, like I said, sell needs versus wants. Even in January, the slow season, people are still going to need to eat. They're still going to need their personal care items. They're still going to need food or, toys or treats for their dogs or their pets. So maybe you look at diversifying your business. Maybe you take a look in and see, hey, what products have I been selling? What categories have I been selling in? And sure, like this time of year, toys, electronics, video games, all those things sell very well, but that's not the same. They don't sell the same amount that they do during the rest of the year, So that's why I would say take a look at your business. Right now is a great time to make sure your repricer is set up. Maybe take a look at the settings that you have set up. Maybe, try out some new ones, things like that. Make sure your accounting is all set up and ready to go. Obviously, tax season's coming up in April. So you want to make sure your taxes, you maybe get a head start working on those. And also just looking, even if like for me, we still are always looking for more wholesale suppliers. Like obviously now we're at the point where a lot of my suppliers like reach out to me directly and offer me deals, and I just kind of say, hey, which ones do we want to take a part in or not? But it still doesn't mean you shouldn't always be looking for new suppliers. So even if you're at a point where you think you have a great set of suppliers, there was a time where I had first got my first warehouse, and my 3 best suppliers, all within 1 week, all different suppliers, all closed their account with me for different reasons. Nothing that I did, just which does happen in wholesale. They say, we don't want to sell to Amazon sellers anymore, or they want to sell themselves on Amazon, or they don't want any of their products on Amazon at all. So, and I lost all 3 of my best suppliers in 1 week. So now I had to start over and start looking for new suppliers. But if you already have a backlog of suppliers to go off of, you don't have to start that process all over again. So a great time to look at expanding that. And yeah, just maybe experiment with different software, go through your shipments on Amazon, make sure there's no lost items or missing items from shipments, and request refunds for those. But yeah, there's definitely a lot you can be doing, even if the sales are a little slower right now.
So there's going to be a backlog of things that you got to do.
Mhm.
Also, that's a good time to expand and find other everyday products that people are using that you can still be profitable. So you're not
Right.
only selling during the high season, the Q4 holiday season, but afterwards, the needs that people want as well as, doing some of the, accounting, some of the work that you're talking about. And Stephen, I want to just ask you again for the prep center, like, is there anything else you want to add before we end our webinar today?
I don't believe so. I think we covered a lot of it. Appreciate the time for being here. Like I said, if people want to reach out to me or questions for me or whatever on my Instagram, it's at Millennial Reseller on Instagram. And for the prep center, it's LBOE Prep. Our website is just lboeprep.com, or if you just Google it, it should come right up. So, and like I said, we're doing your first 100 units with us are completely free. So if you want to take advantage of that offer, just contact us, mention this interview, and we'll get that set up for you.
So for everybody, there's a special deal for Stephen's Prep and Pack Center, LBOE. You can see the deal in below. It's, the first 100 products is free. And make sure to also follow him, Millennial Reseller, on his IG account, so that you can see all the tips and all the knowledge that he's sharing throughout his Amazon journey. Thank you, Stephen, for your time today. It's been a fantastic time. It's been a great learning experience. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.